The next item on the agenda is just to remind you that we will be looking at the monitor's fourth semi-annual report. We had hoped to do that tonight, but in talking with the monitor team, they have made a commitment to actually present that report at the March 27th meeting. So if you would mark that on your calendar, that will be the theme for that particular full commission meeting. And rather than having those of us from the commission presenting that report, we will have people from the monitor team, and they have made the commitment to actually present that report in full. So if you have questions tonight, please just leave those with us. I know some of you probably came to discuss that tonight. So if you have certain sections that you want to recommend, please leave that information with us. But next week, that's the process that we've agreed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Body. For anyone who did not report out but would like to, we remind you to look to the last page of your survey. There is a section on the body camera discussion. Please provide any feedback so that we can collect that and report out at a future time. Thank you. So we're going to move into public comment. It's pretty simple. You raise your hand. I'm going to walk over to you and hand you the microphone. Some ground rules. We would like for each participant to limit their responses to 2 minutes. Provide succinct comments to be respectful of time and other speakers. We have a lot of people out tonight. Please try to avoid attacks and insulting language and name calling when providing your feedback and your comments. If everyone who has been able to speak has had that chance, then those who have already spoken will have a second opportunity. So we would like everyone to be able to say their piece the first go round, and then I will open it up to anyone with additional comments. And we abide to the step up, step back process. That is, share the floor. If you speak all the time, give others an opportunity to speak and say something as well. I can imagine a lot of you have a lot of ideas and a lot of comments that you would like to share, and this is the space for that. If you don't often speak, please, I encourage you to utilize this opportunity to do so. We really want to hear from you. So I will now open it up to the floor. Please raise your hand if you have any comments.
Thank you. I'm Gary Cantor. The consent decree requires that the city's Community Relations Board have an assigned member attend these CPC meetings. Once again, as always, there is no such person in attendance. And once again, the monitor's report gave a check mark for that having been accomplished, which it was not. As I read earlier, the history of the CPPA, on July 23rd, 1968, in the Glenville section of the city, rioting militants murdered 3 of our own. So today, here in the Glenville section of the city, and my father was a proud graduate of Glenville High, I believe in 1940. He spoke about that often. So today, because we're here in the Glenville section, each of us could be looked upon as a rioting militant murderer by the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association. We had all this glorious talk about bias-free policing and understanding the communities in which you engage. And here these guys have on their webpage, they're describing the Glenville section of the city as having rioting militant murderers. But what we don't have in this room today is what the CPC calls key shareholders. Because the CPC is having a meeting, a private, secret, unnoticed meeting for key shareholders only. So unless you've been invited, you've been defined as not a key shareholder. Now, among these key shareholders are supposed to be people with built-in community constituencies. You heard them talk about that earlier. 6 law students were invited to the key shareholders meeting. So somehow, half a dozen law students have these constituencies. Well, they don't. But none of us do, or very few of us do.
Anyone else?
And I think I've talked about this a million times to the CPC. We need to do better in getting the family members in these meetings. The young lady over there stated, these meetings have been going on for a while. She was never notified. So the issue is we have to get these families here. They have to be more aggressive. We have to be more aggressive as a community and as the CPC board to get these family members here. They're the ones who's been very affected by this issue. I've been affected. My brother Craig Bickerstaff was murdered by a Cleveland police officer January 26, 2002. It's been 16 years. This past January, I was wrongfully indicted by a dirty cop when I was out working. He's back to work. He should never be back to work. Like I told the news media, he's back to work because of the collective bargaining agreement. He's wearing a gun and a badge. That is shamefulness. That's his shamefulness. His name is Vincent Lucarelli. He should not be back to work. And this is why it is so important for people who have been affected by this to come to these meetings so we can prevent these officers from getting their jobs back and not showing accountability. And just to let you know, there's cops and retired cops in my family. And that gentleman know over there because he's been at some of our family gatherings.
Anyone else?
Yes, in the monitor team's fourth semi-annual report, one of the things that I read, and it's something that some members of the organization of which I'm a part of, we just started discussing today, but one of the things that we read in the report, it was speaking on policies regarding complaints against law enforcement. Individuals who wish to remain anonymous can make a complaint, and what they want is that those individuals that make a complaint and want to remain anonymous can do so, and that complaint still be taken seriously, investigated, and so forth. Also, individuals who wish to make complaints, not sign them, same thing, or if you do want to sign it. One of the things that I think is, I want people here to keep in mind, because I think anytime that members of our team are going to be in a public setting such as this, we're going to set up on our website a service in which we will have a downloadable complaint form. We're going to make a PDF for it. It'll be downloadable where folks can fill it out. That way, if they want to meet with us and make a complaint, we will come and we will serve as the go-between so that it's not so easy for, if you make a complaint and you wish to remain anonymous, that they can contest it, and then they have no way of getting back in touch with you in order for you to be able to rebut their contesting. So now, if it's done through an organization such as mine, or ours, because it's not mine, or other organizations that might be willing to provide this same service, then what you should be able to do then is have that liaison or that individual, that group that is your go-between to actually be able to advocate for you, because they have advocators and we need advocators too that are given, the powers to be able to advocate for you. So that's just something I want to put out there. So if folks want to make a complaint, know that you don't have to be scared. There are folks that'll help you with that, do that for you.
Thank you. Oh, I actually saw her hand go up.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Carloni. I'm a critical care nurse at a hospital. I'm a mother, and 6.5 years ago, I lost my son to murder. And it's on his behalf that I choose to act on change in our city. So I have a lot of ideas I want to toss out. With the conditions of our country, citizens need to take action. Let's think big, let's be creative, let's be innovative. Our city is laying on the code blue table, and it's not a time to talk about diet. With a lack of accountability, consider preventative measures. Develop a care path of direction that actually encourages goals to see a case through. Of course, there should be consequences of non-compliance, perhaps a position change for burnout, for example. I would really like to see us get rid of the Reed method of interrogation. It's archaic. It's proven to hyper-focus on one suspect, bringing sentencing and convincing of wrong individuals. I would like to see us implement new specific software. We were talking about that during our brainstorming over here. In the homicide department specifically, we need it ASAP. This is proven to solve more crimes, save time and money for the city, and even saving lives. Of course, we're talking about hiring more detectives. I would like to see them specific to the homicide department, trained and focused on increasing our clearance rates, which are only going up. Studies have proven that the obvious correlation between an increase of clearance rates and a decrease in crime rates. And how about combining efforts, combining departments to network and brainstorm together? Let's bring in proactive parents like myself to round tables to exchange updates and to brainstorm ideas. There absolutely needs to be someone appointed to update people like myself who have lost someone to murder. We should never be excluded, avoided, or shunned, and I have been. There absolutely needs to be someone to do this. And a case should never sit idle. If we exhaust our tools, then it should transition automatically to a special team of investigators. Consider bringing in retired FBI agents, retired forensic scientists, private investigators who love what they're doing, and they have a passion, and they want to contribute to society. Some ideas.
Thank you. Let me see.
I'd like a, clarification from the commissioners maybe. It appears that we're going to have a presentation on stop and frisk next month, the March meeting, as well as a presentation by the monitor on the 4th semi-annual report. If memory serves, their presentations are long and not always very detailed. So I don't know if there's really time to do both of those in the same meeting. I was looking at the 4th semi-annual report as well as the update to the outcomes assessment, which is a very lengthy list of numbers. Unless I'm really missing something in looking at use of force, that set of numbers looks at pushing somebody off balance and manipulating them and a taser. It does not include deadly force. It does not include guns. It does not include the baton. It does not include pepper spray as use of force that they're tracking that I can find. So, how come? Or did I miss something? Thanks. Try not to give it to the politician.
Well, good evening. I'm glad some of the monitoring teams are here in the commission. I just want to, I'm going to ask the question in the way that I think Ms. Brown or Mr. Smith in my neighborhood would ask the question. Over the last few weeks, police officers or the safety department have done something that I think they scratch their head and say, well, we got this monitoring team here. We got to fix this problem between the trust between the citizens and the police department. But there are 3 incidents that happened, and you tell me what I should go back and tell Ms. Brown. The first incident would clearly be the corner alley. How did that young boy go back into the corner alley and get shot after she just talked about, the commissioner just talked about the fact that 14 days before that incident, we just had the training on non-lethal force. So if the non-lethal force was to say that before you take out your gun, you should take out your taser, you should do something else, how did the police officer go grab the gun first and shoot that young boy? Secondly, whether it was right or wrong, we don't know. Everybody has their day in court, but the Tanisha Anderson judgment, that the city paid a judgment, but yet the police then got off, and the Ms. Brown and Ms. Smith in my neighborhood is asking, well, how did that happen? And then the last one is what just happened last week with these rape kits. How is it that a police officer got away with not putting the rape kits back, sending them to the state of Ohio, when it is a requirement by law that they have to do that? So all of those 3 things, if you just look, and they just happened over the last 2 weeks, if all of those things happen in that quick scenario, Ms. Brown or Mr. Smith in my neighborhood now looks up and says, well, wow, all that happened from the police department. Didn't happen from some outer space, and it happened from our police department, and yet we got a monitoring team in here that's supposed to be helping us build trust. You're here trying to bring these community meetings here for trust. And like I said, the last one, just the rape kits. How many rapists are walking around the streets of the city of Cleveland now because a police officer did not take the rape kits and send them down to the state of Ohio? And now is that police officer or the people in leadership going to be held accountable for that when they clearly broke the law? Or is it just going to be, well, he made a mistake and he gets to keep his job, like she's saying? Or is that police officer going to be held accountable? And then it goes back to the monitoring team. Then we can say, well, this is the reason that the federal government and the monitoring team's in here. This is the reason we're having the commission to help us improve the police department. But those 3 things are what Ms. Brown and Mr. Smith in my neighborhood are now scratching their head and saying, well, that wasn't just anybody, that was the police department.
I actually see Chi-Chi's hand up.
So I have a question from a community member that they have asked me to read. Okay. The statement in question is as follows. With all of the violence in this community, why aren't there more police officers in this particular area in Glenville, North Collinwood? Along with routine traffic stops to make sure that our community is more safe. Police officers should have their body cameras on at all times to ensure not only their safety, but the safety of their constituents. As a resident that is not only listening and living in this community, I also look to the community because I have kids that go to school within this community. I have children that live in fear every day of their authorities, and they are not patrolling high crime areas along with the communities, and we are not banding together.
Thank you. I'm here as a supplement to my good friend Lynn. I'd like to talk a little bit about the dismal success rate of crime solving in Cleveland. We have come up with a few things that we think would be of help. Peer exchanges with law enforcement agencies. It's a coordination of efforts. Information sharing has been implemented in other cities and proven successful. Many homicides start out as a burglary that escalates. Consider working with other relevant units, combining efforts with homicide and burglary departments. It is time to update and redesign the police website. update the specific line for tips. A phone line should always be available. However, most people want to remain anonymous, so let's create an easily accessible computer site where anyone can do this from a library, for example. With the popular and easy use of cell phones, how about a link where people can post pictures of criminal activity? Our city needs a database, a software application designed to store crime-related information used to collect, analyze, and solve crimes. This, in turn, would not only raise the closure rates and decrease crime, but also save our city money and detective time. Washington State has a homicide investigation tracking system known as HITS. It's a software database used as a central repository for detailed information on violent crime. The most outstanding feature of the HITS computer is its ability to analyze larger quantities of violent crime information more quickly. The level of interstate cooperation in sharing violent crime information exemplified by HITS is unique to the Pacific Northwest and has been responsible for enhancing public safety throughout that region. And our area could use something just like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other? Okay, it looks like we have repetitive hands up.
Hi, I'm sorry I was late. I got really lost. So I want to thank you all for all of your hard work. I don't know if there's any police officers here besides Mr. Fulmer. I don't know if I said your name right. Okay. So I'm really disappointed about, first of all, I'm a homeless advocate and a veterans advocate, and I serve on the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee, which was created by the, part of the consent decree. So I'm really disappointed by the new bias-free police policy. The CPC did an awesome job, excuse me, with their reports, but with all due respect to the two attorneys that were on the committee when the reports were made, I know we now have 3, I think, and the 3 police officers that were on the committee, I don't expect the monitoring team or the DOJ to be familiar with local regulations. However, I cannot for the life of me, when I was doing research, understand how lawyers and police officers did not recognize that ethnic intimidation, as well as intimidation of a homeless person, are codified ordinances in the city of Cleveland. Meaning, if a crime is perpetrated against them based on their demographic status, that it elevates the prosecution, right? So in 2014, excuse me, when they passed this ordinance, it had all the basic demographic groups except for it included Vietnam era or disabled veteran status. And then there was the homeless one that was passed in 2008, says it's a crime to basically target a homeless person. So I cannot for the life of me understand why that was not included, why none of the lawyers in the city of Cleveland caught that. If you have ethnic intimidation ordinances, I would think that they should be included. Also for the fair housing ordinance, it includes the mentally ill, and I think just putting generic disability in there is kind of a slap in the face to anybody that's working on this crisis intervention. Excuse me. And also, unfortunately, I wanted to tell Mr. Reed that there was a recent story that said that the new policies and training were designed to prevent another Tanisha Anderson-like tragedy. And I can tell you, I can't honestly tell somebody that I think that we've prevented that from happening again, because we've never discussed use of force in our meetings. I'm the only one who's ever brought up Tanisha Anderson, and the whole room gets quiet. So we haven't looked at that to see how we could prevent it again. And then finally, Mr. Fulmer, can you please ask the officers to fill out the CIT stat sheets? It is unbelievable that we had, I think, about 187 stat sheets filled out. And so we're supposed to be analyzing this data to make recommendations for future training, policy changes, things like that. And the crisis intervention coordinator, excuse me, I think he's doing a wonderful job, with the exception that I think this is a direct reflection on CPD leadership that officers aren't filling out these forms. And the bottom line is the monitoring team's getting paid $250 an hour to monitor this process, and they cannot terminate the consent decree until the city's been in compliance for 2 years. So if you could please address that with your officers, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some logistics. If there's anyone who would like to provide feedback, we at the CPC, we invite you to email us your questions, comments at info@CLECPC. That is info@clecpc.org. Also, if we could get you to raise your hand for who did not sign in at our sign-in sheet, we'd like to pass that around. Okay. At this time, I'd like to conclude our public comment.
Hold on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With the commissioners?
We have, the commissioners generally do not respond to comments tonight, but I do have commissioners to my left that have heard things that they would like to make a comment on.
Just very quickly, I'm not going to respond to every single one. I want to say in general first, thank you for the feedback and the questions that were asked, the suggestions that were made. All of that stuff has been documented, and if you wrote something down, notes were actually being taken by Bethany over there. Just make sure that she has your contact information, and you can give her further notes. Right, because a lot of the questions and the suggestions that were given tonight are not things specific to the CPC to answer, or can give you an answer, but we can forward that information to the place that it needs to go. One of the things that I love about the commission is that it's the one place in Cleveland that people in Cleveland can come and speak their minds, right? You don't have a public comment period at City Hall. There's no real open door policy in the mayor's office. You know what I'm saying? So like when there's a complaint about what's going on in the city around policing, this is the only place that you can come. And we feel that those comments, we field those questions, and we send them up. One of the things I want to make sure that I speak to is because like the stakeholders meetings that happen, I want to be clear about the fact that like one, college students, I've been to every stakeholders meeting. College students have never been to a stakeholders meeting. The stakeholders meeting does happen. I wouldn't necessarily call it private, but it does happen at the federal building, and we live in, and the whole reason that like systems like this are set up is because we live in a representative democracy. And so there are people who are supposed to represent other interests in those rooms, right? And so what was done is the people who sit up here are people who live or work in Cleveland, right? So I count myself as a member of the community first. And so I am sitting at that table, and I do hear the concerns here at these meetings, and trust and believe me, you can ask anybody who's ever been to one of those meetings. I'm very vocal about community response. I'm very vocal about making sure that we have the necessary time to get the feedback from our communities. When I'm sitting in those meetings, I am thinking of you first, right? Especially Ms. Bickerstaff, right? Like that is the face that comes to my mind when I'm sitting there to make sure that we have the time, because those aggrieved families need to be heard. Right? And so we make sure that like we have the necessary time. CPOP that's coming up. It was brought up in our last stakeholders meeting and the meeting before that, and I made sure that we have the time that we need to bring that policy back so we can get feedback from you. So I don't want this to seem like, there's some ivory tower of people who are making decisions on behalf of the community and not including the community. That's not how this works. I'm an activist first. I've been an advocate my entire adult life. That's all I know. So I don't want this whole idea that somehow there's some disconnection from the work of the community. That's not the case at all. And please tell your friends, tell neighbors, and we're working on making sure that communities know about these meetings. That's why we've been moving them around. Last year we had the meetings pretty much in the same 2 spots. And this year we hired on some community engagement coordinators who've been phenomenal. And the first order of business was to move our meetings around so that we can get new faces in the spaces, so that we can alert people to having an opportunity to come and speak. So I think that was necessary to say, so that your words didn't feel like they went into some vacuum and we weren't listening. We're absolutely listening, we're absolutely documenting, and we're absolutely using that information.
Any other commissioners?
Doctor, yes, just a quick comment. First off, the lady in the back, I apologize I didn't write your name down, but it sounded like you had some more comments. If you want to email those to the executive director, and he'll get, sometimes it's easier to convey those in writing, and he'll make sure all the commissioners get all of your comments. And thank you for your contribution today. I think on the information side and notice, I'm not used to a microphone. I usually just yell in court. On the notice side, I think we need to do a much better job. Putting it on the website doesn't just do it. And maybe we can look to getting the names of different churches and the like, local community, and see if that'll help things get posted. I know the Black Lives Matter group can post it on their website, all of our meetings and the like. So to the extent more information gets out there in terms of notice of our meetings, that'd be great.
Did I hear Gordon? No? Okay, go ahead.
I didn't get your name again. I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry, Rosie?
Rosie. Rosie what?
Halfie?
Okay, Rosie, you had asked about the ethnic intimidation law and how it pertains to...
We can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
No, that's
Now you can, right? Okay, how's that? Okay. You asked about the ethnic intimidation law. I think it's fair to say that the bias-free policy does get at the intent of the ethnic intimidation law, but it doesn't actually invoke it. And so I'll take another look at it to see if there's something else that we can recommend to the police department to make sure it's covered. And I'll talk to you after this meeting about it. I'm a little embarrassed because I wrote Ohio's ethnic intimidation law, so I should know this. But I'm going to look into it and then talk to you after this.
Okay, and thank you again, community, for what you've shared. And as it's already been said, we do take notes, and we will respond in writing. The staff helps us with that to make sure that your voices are heard and appreciated. So at this time, we will accept a motion to approve the minutes from January full commission meeting.
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second that the minutes from January be accepted. Any questions? All in favor, use the voting sign of aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposes? Okay, motion's carried. So that concludes our agenda items for tonight. And again, thank you for your attendance and the energy in the room, your participation. We hope to see you March 27th at the Neighborhood Leadership Institute, 5246 Broadway Avenue. Thank you so much. Good night.